Robert Louis Stevenson tells the story of the unfortunate and mild-mannered Dr. Henry Jekyll, who, while searching for clues to man's nature, becomes the evil Mr. Hyde. It's a classic study of the light and dark side of the human condition, good versus evil, each struggling for control, but both equal halves of the same whole. Without one, the other could not survive. By the way, watch the first scene of this episode carefully, and you might notice something just a little bit strange. In that particular episode, The Enemy Within, we were doing our version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Kirk is split into two entities by a malfunction in the transporter. There's the good side and the evil side.
The imposter is not to be injured. Use minimum force. Repeat. The imposter is not to be injured.
Telling us, in effect, that we all have a positive and a negative side, a light side and a dark side, and in this case, the transporter has split those two elements of him into two separate Kirks. And they can't survive one without the other, is what the story tells us. We have to find a way to get them back together again. And there's a scene in which the writers had written that the two Kirks are in confrontation with each other, and the nasty one, the evil Kirk, has a phaser.
You can't hurt me. You can't kill me. You can't. Don't you understand? I'm part of you. You need me. I need you. I don't need you.
And you say, I don't need you, to the other Kirk. I can live without you, and we're in danger of losing the good Kirk. And if that happens, well, obviously we've got a nasty tragedy on our hands. Spock is written to come up behind the evil Kirk and draw his own phaser and hit the evil Kirk on the head with the butt of the gun. And easy enough to do, and it would have been okay, it would have worked. But again, I was looking for something that was special about the Spock character in a case like this. And I said so to the director. I said, I think that's not a terribly exciting thing for Spock to do. The special, what would the Vulcan do in this case? How would the Vulcan deal with this issue? It's a violent, aggressive, clumsy thing to do, to hit somebody on the head with the butt of a gun, something out of Westerns, maybe 1850s or whatever. We're in the 23rd century. Spock has studied the human anatomy. He's a graduate of the Vulcan Institute of Technology, and Vulcans have all kinds of magic powers that we haven't explored yet. We don't know all of them. We don't know everything about Vulcans yet. Maybe there's something that Vulcans can do that humans can't in a case like this. And he said, well, what do you have in mind? And I went to Bill Shatner and I explained what I was thinking about. And I said, I'm going to put my hand on your neck here, and there'll be like a charge that goes into your muscles here, and you'll go unconscious. And Bill knew exactly what to do, and that's what made it work. Bill went like that, froze up, and dropped in a heap, you know. The producers and writers would see that film the next day at what we call dailies, seeing the daily film from the previous day's shooting. They sit there and look at it and say, oh, look at that. You know, and suddenly they get ideas about how they can use it in the future. And it became known as the famous Vulcan neck pinch, or the famous Spock neck pinch, FSNP. And then in the future, scripts started popping up with references to Spock applies the FSNP. Did you catch what was strange about the first scene? Actually, there are a couple of things. Kirk and Sulu's hair are parted on the wrong side, and Sulu's phaser jumps from his left to his right hip. Why? Because the opening scene was spliced in backwards. Also, there are no insignia on either of their shirts. I guess we can chalk it up to a very rushed production schedule. Also, this episode marks the first time Dr. McCoy says his now legendary catchphrase, "He's dead, Jim." Well, to tell the truth, he really says, "It's dead, Jim," in this episode. But that's close enough. In the 60s, when we were making the show, being cool was important somehow. And if there ever was a cool character, Spock was cool.
If your power of command continues to weaken, you'll soon be unable to function as captain. You must be prepared for that. You have your intellect, Jim. You can fight with that. For how long?
Among other things, being cool to me meant being rational. It meant being sensible. It meant being thoughtful. All of these, the antithesis of being violent, uncontrollable, destructive.
If I seem insensitive to what you're going through, Captain, understand. It's the way I am.
This episode is notable for me because it featured the creation of the famous Vulcan neck pinch. The script had actually called for Spock to sneak up behind the evil Kirk and slug him over the head with the butt of his phaser. However, I felt that Spock would be above that sort of physical violence. It seemed more natural to me that Spock, and all Vulcans, would have the ability to render people unconscious with a mere touch of a well-placed hand. Bill Shatner and I worked it out, and the Vulcan neck pinch was written into the Star Trek history books. You know, sometimes I wish I could actually do it. But that's my evil side talking.